Greetings all, and welcome back to Lucas Brews. And in today's video, we're going to be having a little inbox review of the Academy 1/72 scale Martin PBM5A Mariner, or Marina. I'm not quite sure what the correct pronunciation is for that. I've heard it both ways. Someone in the comment section can give me a little hand with that one. But this is another recent issue from Academy, and it's also, much like the B24, which we've had a look at, from Minicraft originally, so they've gotten the tooling for that. So today we'll have a little bit of a look at it, and in the future at some point I'll do a video on actually building this kit. Very tempted to do a video where I actually try and get this thing to float in a swimming pool, but we'll save that for another video. Anyways, let's have a look at it. So we'll start off by having a look at the box, which as you can see struggles a little bit to fit nicely onto the camera, but we'll see how we go. So on the front here we've got some nice art of one of the mariners flying over the ocean. Looks like there's a few explosions in the background, maybe dropping some bombs or depth charges. So it looks pretty striking, or looks nice and gorgeous. It shows that you've got Australian markings, which we'll be having a look at. And on the corner here you can see both the Academy logo and also the old Minicraft logo, because as I've mentioned, this kit is a re-release of an old Minicraft tooling. On the side here you've got some of the details, so we've got movable and posable control surfaces, including rudders, ailerons and flaps, which is pretty cool. Highly detailed engines with two cowling options, open and closed for the cow flaps there. Detailed cockpit and opening bomb bays with detailed interior, that's pretty cool. Build with turret armament or an unarmed post-war version. Choice of either 3 or 4 bladed propellers, and fine recessed panel lines. So all some nice features, and there's a few options for different mariners, so that's pretty cool. Nothing on the back here as usual for Academy, and the sides are basically just a repeat of the box art, except for the top one here, which has your painting index in Humbrol, CSI or GSI, which is not a brand I'm familiar with. Life Color, Testers, Model Master, Revell, Vallejo and AK Interactive. So I've managed to awkwardly open that up. First up here we've got the decals, including some Australian ones. A bunch of warnings and sort of basic stuff which Academy always include in their kits. Here are the instructions, and there's actually 2 booklets, which is a bit interesting. There's also a marking guide here for the Australian one. And interestingly, it's the Mariner 3S. So this is one that wasn't amphibious. It was actually a freighter version, or a transport, which didn't have any armament. So we'll have to see if we actually have the parts required to build this one. It's a pretty full box. There are 3 plastic bags full of sprues. So we'll have a look at those after we've had a look at these instructions. So I believe this would be the first instruction, because it's got the cover art on it. So it looks like it's in a fold-out format, which is not my favourite. I prefer the booklet, just because it takes up less space, but that's alright. So starting out here, you've got a guide for the masking tape, so where you put all of your masks when you're applying them, which is pretty awesome that you get them in this kit. You don't usually see that in a lot of 72nd scale kits, especially for the price, which is something we'll talk about later. Interior here, so it looks like there's a bit of pedestal detail, as well as the main instrument panel, rudder pedals, some sort of trim wheel that goes in the middle there, 2 seats, the yoke. And then interestingly, back here you've got a sort of radio stack which you build up, and like a navigator's table. And also the engineer's station, which looks like it has some quite nice detail. Looking forward to seeing that on the sprue. Looks like this is the same piece that you've just built up here, but you don't see any interior detail, so I think they might have just done that to simplify it. But anyway, so you put the cockpit floor up on the top there. There's another little floor that goes in here, which will probably also contain the interior detailing for the nose wheel. Another little panel that goes here, and in a sort of inner wheel well, so the area where the main landing gear would retract into, and a lot of windows. So it looks like there's only really interior detailing for the flight deck up here, which is alright. You probably won't really see too much through these windows, and you can always spend a bit of time and super detail the inside. Repeating on the other side, you've got more windows to put in, and the wheel well. That might actually be some sort of window to actually look and inspect the wheels, which is pretty nice that they've done that. So if it's down, you'll be able to see that. Then you're joining the fuselage halves together, so nothing looks too complicated there. You've got the bomb bay, which was built into the area behind the engine cowling. Since there's no landing gear, nothing needs to be retracted in there, so they've done it this way, which is pretty clever. So it looks like there's a bit of a firewall there that gets put into place, a fair bit of ribbing and a few racks for the bombs themselves. Doesn't look like they've got any bombs to carry, but that's alright, you can always find some in the spare stash. And you can have either the bomb bay doors closed or you can cut them in half and open them up. There's basically 2 bottom halves and 3 upper sections. There's sort of a middle section for the top, which would be joined to the fuselage at the bottom there. Looks like there's a bit of radiator detail there that you have to build up, so a few air intakes have to get put together and a few little interior parts, so that all looks quite nicely detailed and not too complicated. Attaching those air intakes and the radiators looks like a either maybe an Astrodome or perhaps just a generic window, or maybe even a navigation light or beacon on the top there that you put in. And interestingly enough, as the box mentions, not only are the ailerons posable, because if you don't cement them, you can have them hinge from the wings by the looks of things. You can also do that with the flaps, which is not something I've seen in any other kit. I've seen plenty where the ailerons and the rudder and the elevator can be posed, but not one with the flaps. So that's interesting. As someone who does a lot of animations with the models I do, that could be a really cool feature, but I'm sure for most people they'll just want to glue it into place. But hey, you can decide that later on after you've painted it, which is pretty nice anyways. Then you're assembling the horizontal stabilizer here, which is, yeah, the wings have got a gull shape, so the engine kind of comes up, and these sort of have a very large dihedral, so like a V they sort of come upwards. Same assembly with the elevators there. If you don't glue them to the main part, as you're gluing their 2 halves together, you can have them posed. Pretty similar assembly again with the rudder, so you've got 2 fins that come on the back here. It looks like there's a few little struts too that have some pinholes to line them up, so you'd probably better to put those all at once to help line up the rudders correctly. Then you've got the float assembly, so there's 2 really large spats that come down and sort of line up. Looks like they've got some pretty decent fixtures for the wings there, so they should be quite nice and solid. Then you have 2 halves of the float, a bottom and a top, and then you join them to the struts that they go on. Engine assembly, so it looks like there's a few little parts to make it up. Join those 3 parts together. Then you've got the cowling for the front there and the cow flaps, which you can either have open or closed, which is nice. Might be fun to add a few little bits of copper wiring to add the various cables in the engine, but otherwise it doesn't look like it's too badly detailed there. And anyways, the Mariner's got a very deep engine cowling, so I don't think you'll see an awful lot of that. But that's it for book 1. Then you've got a second book here, which on the front here, it's got your sprue map, which I thought would have been more handy to have on the first book, but oh well. So I'll unfold this, and I believe this is where you start, so with assembling the propeller. So as it said, you've got options for either the 3-bladed earlier Mariner or the later 4-bladed propeller one. So you stick that to the engine there. Doesn't look like there's a way to actually assemble it so that it spins, which is a little bit of a disappointment in my opinion, but not a lot of people want the engine to spin, I suppose, so that's not the end of the world. And then you build up your turrets. So the front turret, I believe, would be this one. It's sort of like a weird, almost like a B-17's ball turret. It looks like there's some interior detailing for it, which is pretty cool. The breech for the machine guns and some of the ammunition boxes there. You stick the top on after you've put those in, and put the muzzles on the end of the put the muzzles onto the glass there. Then you attach it to a sort of frame, which I believe would then go into the fuselage. Here you've got your, I believe, the ventral turret. Yeah, it's got a ventral turret. That's right, one up there. So it looks like there's a little bit of interior detailing for the turret, which looks pretty nice there, and some machine guns there, which you assemble by putting a little shaft between them and then dropping them into place. Then 2 halves of the clear glass go together, and then you've sort of got the area where the seat, the ammunition, and the basket for the turret would be. And another turret here, which looks pretty much identical, except it would be the rear turret there, because I don't think it's got as much floor space. Moving on, we've got, I'm not actually too sure what these parts are. I'm assuming this is for the landing gear, possibly? It's actually a little bit confusing to me. I think there's options to have something opened, but I can't be sure. Then you've got the cover for the landing gear there, which you can have either open or closed. In the open version, you build the landing gear. Looks like there's a few little struts as well as the main sort of bogey for the landing gear there. And then you have 2 nose wheels on the sides there, and then obviously you cut your door in half and then position it in the open spot there. Here's your main landing gear assembly, which you have to do twice. If you want it closed, you have to just install it upside down basically, and maybe cut these off, or I don't know, it doesn't really say too clearly how to do it closed, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The landing gear kind of just goes upwards and in. And then we have installing all of the smaller accessory, well, the finer parts. So we've got the engines on the front there that you're sticking in, the cockpit canopy, you've got your nose turret, your ventral turret, a little fairing that sort of goes up to the horizontal and vertical stabilizers there, and then the rear turret goes in the back. Last thing you've got here would be either the radar or the antenna option, and that's pretty much done. And the last thing we've got in these instructions would be the painting guide. So you've got the 1945 option here. It's in black and white, which I'm not a huge fan of, but luckily it's a pretty simple scheme. There's just basically a white underside, and then the standard US Navy's two-tone blue on the sides there. You've only got one side, but it does tell you to repeat on the opposite side, but there's not really too many markings to speak of. There's basically just your national roundels, and that's pretty much it. I think there's one little symbol here for the propeller area, so you don't get your head chopped off if you walk towards it. Second scheme is pretty similar. I think it's, yeah, what color is it? It's 8, 9, and 10. And this one's also 8, 9, and 10. So pretty much the same colouring. It's just the later 1947 scheme, so it's got the red stripes on the insignia there. The other sheet of paper that's for decals that you have are the Australian markings. So I'll probably be doing this scheme when I get around to building this kit, and foliage green's a bit of a tricky one. I've been experimenting a little bit to get a colour I'm happy with, but I think I finally have, which I'll be sharing when I do this video. But it's not too complex either. There's a couple of roundels, a cheeky pin-up on the front there, and then the registration and the squadron markings. So we got our Mariners, I believe we had about 12 of them, and they were the transport version, as I mentioned, and I believe they all came from the British, who were going to use the Martin Mariner under Lend-Lease, but decided in the end their short Sunderlands were good enough. Anyways, that's the instructions out of the way. Let's have a look at the actual plastic.